My name is Nina, and Miley Cyrus owns me. Hello there, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. It's so good to see you. You look amazing today. So on November 27th, Miley Cyrus released Plastic Hearts, her 80s rock fever dream of an album that was kind of teased after her Blondie Heart of Glass cover was released, and the public went, hey, Miley Cyrus can really belt. This changes things. And as someone who's really excited about this idea but like cautious about what the album would actually be like, Plastic Hearts is really fucking good. It's everything I want in a rock album and a Miley album. It has like wailing guitar riffs, sing-along choruses, but also just like genuinely really great songwriting that stabs you in the heart, has you dancing a little bit. She's a powerhouse and we been knew this. Like, Hannah Montana, do I dare even bring up See You Again? He Could Be the One. The power that those have. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, end of discussion. On this album, she took on kind of a sheen of rebellion. Not like swinging naked in a construction site rebellion, but like a sonic vintage rebellion. Straying from the pop music that defined her career to create an album that feels like it would be best enjoyed, not in a bougie club after a few too many Aperol spritzes, but in like a grungy dive bar with Kim Fowley lurking around somewhere. And while this album has the catchiness and like not giving a fuckness of previous Miley albums, she really went in on creating a decidedly rock album. In a year when the top genres are hip hop, pop, even country. Yeehaw. I also knew that I wanted to talk about this after like heavily bumping Machine Gun Kelly's Tickets to My Downfall, his pop punk album that came out in late September. This album really is pop punk at its finest, at least in my opinion. And he really leaned into the authenticity by collaborating with Travis Barker of Blink-182, and he featured Burt McCracken from The Used on a song Body Bag. This album really made me feel like it was 2009 and I was turning on my radio to hear 21 Guns by Green Day. At that moment in time, pop punk and rock was accepted in mainstream culture, like top 40 culture, a lot more than it is today. Sure, pop punk and punk in general has existed for decades, but there was something about this specific moment in time where you would hear something by Green Day right before you would hear I Got a Feeling by the Black Eyed Peas that really signified how much more of the mainstream consciousness pop punk had like infiltrated. So with these two albums, we can officially pinpoint a trend. There are these artists that have made their careers off of pop and hip hop respectively that are turning to a grungier sound to really pave the way for pop punk's resurgence for the new generation. So other than their like obvious vocal ability to perform this music, what made Miley turn to rock and Machine Gun Kelly turn to pop punk in 2020? And why is rock and pop punk having a resurgence this year? Let's get into it. So first, let's talk about what music is popular in 2020 for the most part. Over the past year or so, popular opinion has really shaped what we know now as sort of the 2020 genre of music, the majority of which is shared and popularized on apps like TikTok, which kind of causes these songs to be short and able to be shared with audiences worldwide. Thus, in 2020, we're listening to songs that are a lot shorter and that are also sort of this amazing mishmash of genres from around the world. We get masterpieces like Lil Nas X's Old Town Road, Doja Cat's Bottom Bitch, both of which are very distinctly 2020 in their flow and their lyrics, but are also kind of timeless in their sampling and instrumental influences. The anatomy of hits today usually do contain some basic elements. So you have drum machines, recorded samples, synth sounds, lyrics about love, club culture, and sexuality, and then simple chords with complicated rhythms, which is really where the hip-hop influence comes in. In contrast, Miley kind of ditches this 2020 formula to serve up an electrified rock album, albeit incorporating a little bit of the fluidity of the 2020 genre in that each song is kind of a different slice of rock. You have like an industrial track here, true blue 80s rock, power ballad, etc. And obviously the anatomy of like a rock song is super different. You have live drums, electric and acoustic guitars, lyrics about love and social change, and blues-like chord progressions. And these songs don't feel rushed. I think that's important. She doesn't make songs that feel like they were made to be jammed into like 10-second TikToks with a cute little dance. And luckily, no more clumsy rapping from Miss Miley. Thank fucking God.
In the move, like it's my house.
Oh my God. The instrumentation and production of these songs is also a lot more like basic than 2020 music. She sticks with a few recognizable sounds and then lets her voice do the dazzling, rather than adding a lot of electronic flourishes or letting the production speak for her. Because in 2020, the production can almost be as much of a vocalist as the vocalist. You know what I mean? Machine Gun Kelly's album uses a lot of these same tricks too, utilizing simple sounds to follow the pop punk playbook to a T. Not to say that he doesn't experiment a little bit sonically too. I mean, he still has songs with like Trippie Redd and Black Bear that are a lot more pop. You can see his hip hop influence seeping in, but really it's like a very solid themed album that keeps you kind of like banging your head at the same tempo the whole time. It kind of reminded me of a lot of my favorite songs from bands like We the Kings back in the day, where like, did they use the same BPM and also chords for like all of the songs? Yes, but does that make you want to turn it off? No. It kind of just keeps you in a zone. The angst is up to 100, and I think the Machine Gun Kelly accomplished what he set out to do, and he did it really well. So as of late, how has rock music interacted with the mainstream? So I'm obviously not gonna go into like an encyclopedic history of rock because we'd be here for hours. Let's just establish that for the past few decades, it's been a given that rock music is the most popular music in the country. That is until 2016, when Views by Drake set an all-time record for most streams with 245 million. And of the albums with over 100 million streams in a week, there was a list that was led by Drake, The Weeknd, J. Cole, Beyonce. In 2017, hip hop and R&B officially dethroned rock as the most popular genre in the US. These genres made up 25.1% of the country's listening consumption compared to rock's 23%. And this is largely due to the increasing importance of music production. Today, focus has shifted from melody and lyrics to tracks and hooks. The sound itself, the production, is of such great importance that it has become an integrated part of the composition. Why is this stuff so hard to say? The digitization of music production and the popularity of streaming platforms has also really shifted what music making looks like and how accessible it is today. For example, every MacBook comes preloaded with GarageBand, right? So like, what is easier, especially today in the era of the pandemic? What is easier? Finding people to form a band with, buying instruments, having access to a practice space, paying for recording time in a studio, or you could just go onto GarageBand, beep boop it out. Everything is there for you. There's so many resources for stems, different samples, music production tutorials on YouTube. It's like so much easier. You just put it on SoundCloud, there it is, and you have access to the world. In terms of genre, it's so much easier with the tools that we have preloaded on our laptop to make more digital music, make music that leans more hip hop and overly produced pop versus grungy rock and roll that requires live instruments. Now let's talk about how pop punk has interacted with the mainstream in the past few decades. Once again, not gonna give you some like long convoluted history here, but the origins of pop punk date back to the 1970s and 1980s, with bands ranging from the Talking Heads to Blondie to the Ramones to the Descendants. They all laid the groundwork for a fusion of catchy, hook-filled pop and a hardened punk edge. In the early 1990s, California punk bands Green Day and Bad Religion started getting more press attention because there was a growing pop punk scene in Southern California at the time. And then in 1993, both bands got signed to major labels. Green Day's major label album debut, Dookie, in 1994, sold 4 million copies, and because of that, MTV started playing it consistently, giving them a lot more mainstream attention. Outlets like MTV and the radio station K-Rock in Los Angeles, as well as the debut of Warped Tour, go watch my Warped Tour video if you would like to hear more about that, catapulted pop punk into mainstream popularity. Then in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the band Blink-182 blew up with the release of their album Enema of the State, which got very consistent play on MTV. They were basically inescapable in the early 2000s.
I wish somebody fun would show up.
And if you think about it, these bands were like the perfect mainstream choice. They were just raw and edgy enough to capture the attention of wayward youth and get those edgy teenagers tuning in, but just pop enough to be radio friendly. Okay, I can't not mention my absolute queen, the reason for my being and also for my wildly unrealistic skater girl dreams, Avril Lavigne.
Do you want to press small?
Avril Lavigne. Wait, I have something to show you. Look what I have. I went to my local corner store, which is literally 2 seconds away. I found this frame and this was the image. This was the stock image in this frame, and I've been thinking about just buying every single one because it's amazing. It's like an Avril Lavigne build your own shrine kit. They knew I was coming. So anyway, she reminds me to always be a girl and also always be a little bit of a skater. Let's be real. Thank you, queen. Anyway, you know what? I'm just gonna put her right in the background. She'll be watching over us. If anything goes wrong, she'll let us know. So where was I? So Avril Lavigne is credited with launching female-fronted pop punk into the mainstream. Her 2002 debut album, Let Go, gave us infectious pop, unapologetic attitude, rock and grunge fusion. It gave us fashion. It gave us a movement. So at this point, in the early to mid-2000s, bands like My Chemical Romance, Paramore, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, you'd turn on your radio at any given moment and they would be playing alongside whatever pop hit was big. Like, that was just the norm. These hardcore-leaning groups were household names, building larger fan bases through mainstream media exposure. Pop punk started to fall out of mainstream favor in the early 2010s, when pop radio was pivoting to more electronic, dance-focused sounds. These more pop punk rock-leaning bands just weren't being covered by mainstream media in the same way anymore, except by, you know, more niche punk rock publications, and even those started dying out. Except for alternative press, which still somehow exists and also has sort of become an embarrassing emo BuzzFeed. I'm sorry, alternative press. But this isn't to say that pop punk disappeared completely. In the intermediate years, the genre has sort of thrived and reinvented itself just out of the mainstream spotlight with every new band that pops up. Some highlights are bands like The Story So Far and Neck Deep, even 5 Seconds of Summer, who in 2014, when their debut album came out, they kind of nudged pop punk back into the mainstream spotlight when their album hit #1 on the Billboard charts. So now let's talk about the function of rock and pop punk, like what these genres are trying to say and why they've hit so hard for audiences over decades. So first of all, rock expresses angst, frustration, anger about the times, especially uniting youth, who rock has become synonymous with, who may feel powerless in different aspects of their lives. Today, one could say, the youth especially are feeling disenfranchised and powerless when it comes to the pandemic, Trump, police brutality, homophobia, sexism, social media being a fucking cesspool. Rock music and pop punk provides an outlet for all of us to just collectively scream about it, which I think is therapeutic and very much needed right now. Like I said before, rock and pop punk is very synonymous with youth and youth culture. It's empowering the youth, validating this power and this rage, romanticizing boredom and love and frustration. And it's just like the perfect bedroom soundtrack, which is where a lot of us are trapped right now. Rock also portrays a kind of individualism. It's always been a voice for the other. It sets the artist and the listener apart in their fucked upness, in their strong emotions. And it helps both the artist and the audience own this difference with these raw, unapologetic sounds. Once again, providing a sense of power, which we all desperately need right now. So this music does strike a chord with the disenfranchised. I mean, take Machine Gun Kelly, for instance. Machine Gun Kelly's music might really strike a chord specifically with people who are dealing with drug and alcohol abuse or dealing with grief about a family member. In Miley's case, her music speaks to like owning her sexuality, coming of age, dealing with the fracturing of a public relationship. I mean, some of these things are a little bit more celebrity than others, but they're all kind of universal experiences at the core. And what better way to express them than by getting really loud and saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm dealing with, fuck you if you don't accept it. Let's all like scream together as this like band of misfits. That's kind of the vibe of this music. And I think, can other music, can like more 2020 hip hop pop music express these things? Absolutely. But I think that there is something very therapeutic, very cathartic about being able to yell and scream and have your wailing guitar solos and just headbang along to something that has just like a veneer of angst to it. When I was doing research for this video, I was wondering, what is the consensus about the cyclical nature of music? We all know that like fashion kind of works in a cycle, which is why, I mean, e-girls are a big thing. I would have killed to be an e-girl back in the day because it was this and this was me. This is real. Also the fact that TikTok has rediscovered yoga pants as flared leggings, which I have a lot of complicated feelings about. Does our collective music taste kind of work in a cycle? I think it really just depends who you ask. I found a lot of differing opinions about this. And I mean, obviously every generation has its own new, original, emerging style of music, as we have discussed. But in an online article for Perfect Sound Forever magazine, author Greg Juke, he details the 20-year rule that I found kind of intriguing. Basically, this rule dictates that trends come in and out of fashion in a cycle of 20 years, give or take. There are always two main waves of popular music moving through the mainstream at any given time. The new, currently popular, and the retro, generally music that was initially popular 20 years or 2 decades earlier. This also seems true, perhaps to a somewhat lesser extent, for non-musical but related cultural trends. So with this in mind, 20 years from today was the 2000s. Baby, I think that we have cycled back. Let's just fucking do it. I mean, this is the time. This is the pop punk, pop rock resurgence. I love Miley's album. I love Machine Gun Kelly's album. I think that they are really gonna do wonders for bringing this kind of music back to a new, young mainstream audience that may not have been part of it when Warped Tour was big, when Blink-182 and Green Day were first hitting the scene. And so the more that this music starts to gain mainstream traction, the more new bands are gonna start popping up, the more that maybe it will start influencing the way that people digitally produce music, because that's obviously not going anywhere, and I don't want it to go anywhere. But if it was a little bit more hardcore, I wouldn't complain. So yeah, in conclusion, bring on the mainstream pop punk. Can't think of a better way to celebrate the Roaring 20s. So psyched. So with all that being said, we've reached the end of the video. Thank you so fucking much for watching. I can't wait to be back with my next fun little music themed video, or honestly whatever the fuck I want to do. So stay tuned, because as my sanity dwindles, my video ideas will probably get a little wackier, a little funky. So thank you so much. Bye.